August 15th, 2025, 0500 hours local time, Taiwan Strait. The pre-dawn darkness over the Taiwan Strait carried an unusual electronic silence that made Commander Sarah Chen's skin crawl. Aboard the USS Ronald Reagan, the carrier's Combat Information Center hummed with tension as radar operators stared at screens showing nothing but empty ocean. "Ma'am, we've lost contact with our forward reconnaissance drones," reported Lieutenant Commander Martinez, his voice betraying the first hint of concern. The Reagan steamed at 18 knots, her massive hull cutting through the choppy waters exactly 120 nautical miles northeast of Taiwan's coast. Captain James Morrison stood behind the Central Command console, his weathered hands gripping the rail as he processed the morning intelligence briefing. "Sir, SIGINT is picking up massive data transmissions from the mainland," announced the communications officer, her headset crackling with encrypted Chinese military frequencies. Morrison's jaw tightened as he recognized the signature of coordinated electronic warfare preparation. The carrier's escort vessels, USS Chancellorsville, USS Curtis Wilbur, and USS Rafael Peralta, maintained standard formation spacing of 5 nautical miles. "All stations, this is actual," Morrison's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "Set condition 2 throughout the ship." Below deck, the controlled chaos of a carrier preparing for potential combat erupted across 24 decks. In the hangar bay, maintenance crews swarmed around 36 FA-18 Super Hornets, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. Aviation Ordnanceman Second Class Rodriguez felt sweat beading on his forehead as he loaded AEM-120 AIMRAAM missiles onto aircraft number 407. "Contact bearing 090, range 200 nautical miles," the air search radar operator called out, his voice cutting through the CIC's background chatter. Morrison moved to the radar display, watching as dozens of small contacts appeared simultaneously along the Chinese coastline. "Size and speed," he demanded, though his gut already knew the answer. Multiple small contacts, airspeed varying between 200 and 600 knots, altitude sea level to 30,000 feet. The tactical display showed a swarm of contacts, unlike anything the Reagan's crew had encountered in their previous deployments. "Sir, contact count is now exceeding 500 individual targets," the radar operator reported, his voice climbing an octave. Morrison felt his mouth go dry as he realized they were witnessing the first deployment of China's rumored AI drone swarm technology. On the flight deck, the controlled ballet of launch operations began as the first wave of Super Hornets prepared for catapult launch. Lieutenant Commander Viper Thompson sat in the cockpit of his F/A-18, running through pre-flight checks while his hands trembled almost imperceptibly. "Tower, Viper 1 requesting immediate launch clearance," his voice crackled over the radio. Professional training overriding personal fear. The massive catapult system hurled 47,000 pounds of aircraft and pilot from 0 to 160 knots in 3 seconds. Viper's vision grayed momentarily as 4.5 Gs of acceleration pressed him into his ejection seat. "Viper flight airborne, request vector to contacts," he transmitted, his Super Hornet climbing through 10,000 feet. In the CIC, Morrison watched the tactical display as his fighters moved toward an enemy unlike any they had trained to face. The Chinese drone swarm began to separate into multiple formations, each group following complex flight patterns that suggested artificial intelligence coordination. "Sir, Electronic Warfare Suite is detecting active jamming across all frequencies," reported the EW officer, adjusting multiple controls on her console. The Reagan's AN/SPY-6 radar struggled to maintain lock on targets that seemed to dance and weave in impossible formations. Morrison activated the ship's Link 16 network, coordinating with 7th Fleet headquarters in Japan. "7th Fleet, this is Reagan Actual, requesting immediate reinforcement and rules of engagement clarification." The response came through encrypted channels, carrying the weight of potential global conflict. "Reagan Actual, you are authorized to defend your task force, weapons free on hostile contacts." The words hung in the air like a death sentence, as Morrison realized they had crossed the threshold from peacekeeping to combat. Air Boss, launch all available aircraft, Morrison commanded, watching as his tactical display showed the drone swarm, now only 150 miles away. On the flight deck, organized chaos erupted as deck crews prepared 18 additional Super Hornets for immediate launch. The Reagan's 4 steam catapults worked at maximum capacity, launching aircraft every 90 seconds. Below deck, the nuclear reactor pushed steam pressure to maximum as the carrier increased speed to 30 knots. Chief Petty Officer Williams monitored reactor temperatures that climbed steadily toward redline conditions. Engineering, I need maximum power to defensive systems, Morrison's voice echoed through the engineering spaces. The massive ship's close-in weapons system came online, its 6-barreled 20mm Gatling guns rotating ominously. Sailors throughout the ship felt the deck vibrate as the phalanx systems tracked across empty sky, searching for targets. Contact, Vampire! Vampire! Multiple inbound missiles! The radar operator shouted, his professional composure finally cracking. The tactical display exploded with red symbols as the Chinese drone swarm launched its coordinated attack. Morrison watched in fascination and horror as 300 small missiles separated from the drone platforms. Each missile weighed only 50 pounds, but their collective impact would be devastating. All stations, incoming missile attack. This is not a drill, Morrison announced over the ship's general alarm. The Reagan's Sea Sparrow missiles launched from vertical cells, their exhaust creating massive plumes of white smoke. Lieutenant Sarah Kim in the ship's Missile Control Center felt her heart racing as she designated targets for the automated defense systems. I count 240 inbound missiles, time to impact 4 minutes 30 seconds, she reported, her voice steady despite shaking hands. The first wave of Super Hornets reached intercept position, their pilots facing an enemy unlike anything in their training. Viper 1 engaging multiple targets, Thompson transmitted, his aircraft's radar struggling to lock onto the small agile drones. His first AIM-120 missile streaked toward a cluster of drones, its radar seeker confused by electronic countermeasures. The missile detonated harmlessly between targets, its fragmentation pattern ineffective against the dispersed swarm. Negative kill. These things are too small, Thompson reported, frustration evident in his voice. Behind him, Lieutenant Commander Jackson in Viper 2 attempted a different approach, diving low to engage with his 20mm cannon. The drone swarm seemed to anticipate his attack, scattering in 3 dimensions with coordination that defied human understanding. Jackson's cannon fire traced across empty sky as the drones executed impossible turning maneuvers. They're learning our attack patterns, he transmitted, disbelief coloring his professional report. Aboard the Reagan, Morrison watched his fighters struggle against an enemy that adapted in real time to their tactics. The Chinese drones began coordinating their movements, creating interlocking fields of defensive fire. Sir, inbound missiles now at 2 minutes to impact, the radar operator announced, sweat visible on his forehead. The ship's phalanx systems engaged automatically, their distinctive buzzing sound filling the air. 20mm rounds streaked skyward at 4,500 rounds per minute, creating a wall of lead. The first Chinese missiles began detonating against the defensive fire, but dozens more penetrated the screen. Morrison felt the deck shudder as the first impact struck the carrier's flight deck. Small explosions erupted across the massive ship, each 50-pound warhead designed for precision rather than raw destruction. The drone swarm's strategy became clear: disable rather than destroy, capturing the carrier intact. Damage control teams to stations throughout the ship, Morrison commanded, his voice calm despite the chaos. Below deck, Damage Controlman First Class Patterson led his team toward a fire in the forward aircraft elevator. The narrow passages filled with smoke as automated fire suppression systems activated. Patterson's team moved with practiced efficiency, their training overriding fear as explosions continued above. On the flight deck, aviation boatswain's mate Thompson worked frantically to launch the remaining aircraft. Shrapnel from the missile impacts had damaged 2 catapults, reducing launch capacity by half. Flight deck casualties, medical teams to stations, echoed over the ship's communication system. Dr. Angela Martinez rushed through the ship's corridors, her medical bag bouncing as she ran toward the flight deck. The wounded sailors she encountered showed a mix of shrapnel injuries and burns from the precise Chinese attacks. Meanwhile, the drone swarm regrouped for a second attack, their AI systems processing lessons from the first engagement. Morrison watched his tactical display as the remaining 400 drones formed new attack formations. "Sir, they're adapting faster than we can respond," reported his operations officer, voice tight with stress. The Chinese drones had learned to exploit gaps in the ship's defensive fire, timing their approaches with mechanical precision. "Viper flight, break off intercept, and establish combat air patrol," Morrison ordered. Recognizing the futility of close engagement, his Super Hornets pulled back to defensive positions, their pilots frustrated but following orders. Lieutenant Commander Thompson felt helpless as he watched the drones mass for their next attack. "Reagan, this is Viper 1, requesting permission to attempt ramming attacks," he transmitted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Negative, Viper 1, maintain patrol stations," Morrison replied, unwilling to sacrifice his pilots needlessly. The second wave of Chinese missiles launched simultaneously, creating a coordinated barrage of 120 warheads. The Reagan's defensive systems engaged again, but the drones had calculated optimal attack vectors. "Multiple impacts amidships. Flight deck operations suspended," reported the damage control officer. Morrison felt his ship shuddering under the precise bombardment, each impact strategically placed to disable key systems. The Chinese strategy became increasingly clear. They intended to capture, not sink, the Reagan. "Engineering, I need emergency power to defensive systems," Morrison commanded, his calm beginning to crack. Chief Williams struggled with reactor controls as multiple systems demanded power simultaneously. "Captain, we're pushing the reactor beyond safe parameters," he reported over the intercom. The nuclear plant that powered the massive carrier groaned under the strain of maximum output. Throughout the ship, sailors felt the unusual vibrations as systems operated beyond design limits. In the CIC, radar operators watched as the drone swarm prepared for a third coordinated attack. "Sir, contact count is still over 300 active drones," reported the air warfare coordinator. Morrison realized that his ship's ammunition was running dangerously low after only 20 minutes of combat. The Chinese had planned for a prolonged engagement, their drones carrying minimal but precise warheads. "Weapons Department, ammunition status report," Morrison demanded, though he feared the answer. "Sir, Sea Sparrow missiles at 30%, Phalanx ammunition at 40%, came the reply. The mathematical reality of the engagement settled over the CIC like a death shroud. Above the ship, Viper Flight maintained their patrol, helpless witnesses to the systematic dismantling of their carrier. "Reagan, we're watching them position for another coordinated strike," Thompson reported, his frustration evident. The drone swarm had spread across a 50-mile area, making simultaneous engagement impossible. Morrison made the hardest decision of his naval career, reaching for the secure communication system. "7th Fleet, Reagan Actual, requesting immediate assistance. We are being overwhelmed by coordinated AI attack." The response came with devastating clarity. "Reagan, nearest assistance is 6 hours away." Morrison stared at the tactical display, watching as the Chinese drones prepared their final assault. The AI controlling the swarm had learned from each previous attack, optimizing for maximum effectiveness. "All hands, this is the captain," Morrison announced over the ship's general alarm. "Prepare for sustained attack." Throughout the Reagan, 5,000 sailors prepared for what might be their final battle. In the medical bay, Dr. Martinez prepared triage stations for massive casualties. The ship's chaplain moved through the corridors, offering final prayers to sailors who requested them. Aviation crews on the flight deck worked desperately to launch the remaining functional aircraft. The Chinese drones began their final approach, moving in perfect coordination across multiple attack vectors. Morrison watched as his ship's defensive systems prepared for one last desperate engagement. The Phalanx guns traversed skyward, their targeting computers calculating intercept solutions. "Inbound missiles, multiple vectors, impact in 90 seconds, announced the radar operator. The Reagan's remaining Sea Sparrow missiles launched in a final defensive barrage. White contrails filled the sky as the ship's last hope streaked toward the incoming swarm. Several drones fell to the missile attack, but the majority continued their approach. "All hands, brace for impact," Morrison commanded, his voice carrying across every compartment. The ship's crew grabbed whatever support they could find, knowing their fate was beyond their control. The Chinese missiles struck with precision, targeting the ship's remaining defensive capabilities. Each impact was calculated to disable rather than destroy, preserving the carrier for potential capture. Morrison felt his ship dying beneath his feet as systems failed across the massive vessel. The flight deck became unusable, trapping aircraft that could have provided air cover. Below deck, damage control teams struggled against fires that spread beyond their capability to contain. Chief Patterson led his team through smoke-filled passages, their breathing apparatus running low on air. The nuclear reactor automatically scrambled, leaving the ship without power for defensive systems. Emergency diesel generators struggled to provide minimal electricity for essential functions. In the CIC, backup battery power kept critical displays functioning for 30 more minutes. Morrison watched as the Chinese drone swarm circled his crippled carrier like mechanical vultures. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission on international emergency frequency," reported the communications officer. The message came in clear English, spoken by an artificial voice that carried no emotion. "USS Ronald Reagan, you have 30 minutes to abandon ship before final assault begins." Morrison stared at the radio, realizing he was receiving an ultimatum from an artificial intelligence. The Chinese AI had calculated that capture was preferable to destruction, offering the crew safe passage. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked his executive officer, the weight of command visible in his eyes. Morrison looked around the CIC at the sailors who had served with distinction against impossible odds. The tactical display showed Chinese surface vessels approaching from the west, ready to claim their prize. "All stations, this is the captain," Morrison began, his voice heavy with the burden of defeat. The order to abandon ship hung in the air, unspoken but understood by every member of the crew. Below deck, sailors began the process of securing classified materials and preparing lifeboats. The Reagan listed slightly to starboard as damage control pumps failed to keep pace with flooding. Viper flight continued circling overhead, their fuel running dangerously low but unwilling to abandon their ship. "Reagan, this is Viper 1, requesting permission to remain on station," Thompson transmitted, his voice breaking. Morrison authorized the fighters to return to Taiwan, preserving what remained of his air wing. The Chinese drones maintained their patrol, demonstrating the superiority of artificial intelligence over human tactics. As the sun rose over the Taiwan Strait, the USS Ronald Reagan, symbol of American naval power, sat dead in the water. The implications of the engagement would reverberate through military headquarters across the globe. For the first time in naval history, artificial intelligence had defeated human strategy and technology. The age of drone warfare had begun with a decisive victory that changed the balance of power in the Pacific. Morrison stood on his bridge, watching Chinese vessels approach his abandoned carrier. The crew evacuation proceeded with military discipline, even in defeat maintaining their professionalism. As lifeboats moved away from the Reagan, Morrison took one final look at his command. The massive carrier that had projected American power across the oceans now belonged to history. The Chinese AI drones continued their patrol, mechanical sentinels guarding their captured prize. In Beijing, military leaders studied telemetry from the engagement, analyzing every aspect of their victory. The successful deployment of AI drone swarms opened new possibilities for future conflicts. Pentagon officials received reports of the engagement with growing alarm about American military capabilities. The USS Ronald Reagan incident would be studied in military academies for generations to come. The balance of naval power in the Pacific had shifted permanently in the space of 3 hours. As rescue vessels approached the American survivors, the full implications of the defeat began to emerge. The Chinese AI had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded all previous military projections. The era of traditional naval warfare ended on August 15, 2025, in the Taiwan Strait. The question was no longer whether artificial intelligence would dominate future conflicts, but how quickly human military forces could adapt. Morrison's final log entry would read simply, "Defeated by superior artificial intelligence coordination. The USS Ronald Reagan veteran of decades of American naval supremacy, had become the first casualty of the AI warfare age. The strategic implications would reshape military planning across every major power. The Chinese drone swarm victory marked the beginning of a new chapter in the history of warfare itself.